Cardassians drink hot fish juice in the mornings. Captain Sisko receives the Orb of Time from the Cardassians. And Worf has an earthy, peaty aroma with a touch of lilac. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
Who also smells with a touch of lilac, right?
Yeah, I keep that frankincense and myrrh. So I got a little
biblical. Nice. My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today we're doing a review of the legendary, the epic, the ground-shattering and earth-moving Trials and Tribble-ations. A lot of people contributed to this one, so let me pull it up very quickly. Story by Ira Steven Bear, Hans Beimler, and Robert Hewitt Wolf, and teleplay by Ronald D. Moore, Renee Echevarria, or Echevarria, I don't really know how that is pronounced properly, and directed by Jonathan West. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Happy to start reviewing this episode because it was a big deal back then. I remember the extra hype and the piqued interest by everybody when we were filming this episode. I'm just happy to watch it and to start to get to review it a little bit.
Yeah. I was hoping you remembered it. This is exciting. I'm glad to hear that. Very quickly, let us give a shout out to AbyssinianKiosk.com. That is Cirroc's sister who runs that website, and I can tell it's hidden in there a little bit, but Cirroc is wearing a shirt from there, and it is awesome.
Oh yeah, we're representing, cross shirts. So
she's got the coolest designs. A lot of them are East African, specifically Ethiopian in nature. Really cool color schematics, really cool designs. Some of them are Star Trek related, some are not. Definitely go check that out. You can find the link in the description box below. That's AbyssinianKiosk.com, and it's getting very popular, I think.
And just a little bit of a background on the name. Abyssinian is the old name for Africa, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And specifically that region in Africa, the Eastern African region. And the reason we use the word kiosk, or my sister picked the word kiosk, is because in Ethiopia we have a lot of these little kiosks, and we actually call them kiosks in Ethiopia. But these little kiosks, which essentially are these really small shops that are about the size of a little locksmith, booth or locksmith shop. But those little places will have the phone cards, they'll have all the stuff that you need, candies and water bottles, and those little things are everywhere in little neighborhoods and throughout Ethiopia. So the kiosk does a lot of big business. They serve the purpose of what a 7-Eleven or a Quickie Mart does out here. Those little gas station AM PM type rest stops. They serve that same kind of purpose. You can even make a phone call from there if you need to. Except they're not as large and they're not as well organized. They're more mom and pop type shops.
It's small business. Very small. We love small business.
So just so that's the origin behind the idea of calling it the Abyssinian kiosk.
Mm-hmm.
It's a shout out and homage to the real thing that's happening all throughout Africa. Those little kiosks.
Really cool. Never knew that.
Yeah.
Cool. So check that out.
But
the link.
But back to Trials and Tribble-ations. I know you wanted to know if I remembered this episode.
Yeah. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that. See, I wasn't in this episode. Obviously, you guys have watched it as well, and even though I wasn't in this episode, I was around the set when they were filming this episode, so I got to see the cast dressed up in the retro uniforms. I got to see the station flooded with tribbles everywhere, which was really super fun, just kicking around a bunch of tribbles. and you know, everybody was throwing tribbles at each other. They're soft little pillow type, cushiony little animals. Some of them can shake and have a little mechanism in them that allows them to vibrate and make a little sound. But for the most part, they were just inanimate pillows with these, you know, with that fur. And so there were a lot of throwing those around at people and, you know, joking in that kind of way when you wanted to get somebody's attention. But what I do remember was the publicity that was there. There was a lot of photographs being taken. There were writers were on the set, producers were on the set, some executives were on the set,
Wow,
and
a lot of hype.
there was a lot of hype, and there was a sense of something historical happening here that they wanted to witness in person. So that's my first memory of this particular episode.
Yeah, you know, there was a lot of hype outside of the set as well. I remember there must have been commercials about it or something, because I remember when it first came out, this was like an event. This was like a check this out. And everybody was like, how are they going to do this? What's going on? You know, everybody was like, it was kind of like must see TV, you know, and it was amazing. It was really cool. It was, I remember it was mind blowing at the time. And what was this like, you know, mid to late 90s. And watching it again, it's still mind blowing. You know, now I kind of look at what the tricks are a little bit more, you know, now that we know the tricks, you know, but it still was such an ambitious undertaking, because if you don't do it right, then it's kind of just, it's going to be a downer, you know, it's not going to look very good. It's not going to be, it's going to be more of a negative than if you hadn't tried it in the first place. But I feel like they hit it out of the park. What do you think?
Yeah, and you know, during this period of time, the level of special effects is not what you know what it is today. And just to clarify for the listeners and the audience, that you know, watching it now and you get to see, you know, all this special effects that are done today with Pixar and you know all of these Lucas and all of these people. They're making amazing films at this point. But
And
special
Paramount.
effects and Paramount, yes. But this wasn't really done on television to this degree. This kind of seamless transition, this kind of visual effect that really merged two complete generations of television. My first thought when I was watching it was Forrest Gump, because I remember in Forrest Gump there were scenes in that movie where Tom Hanks' character is shaking hands with the president,
Yeah.
and they blend him into certain scenes, so it looks like he was there during that time, you know. And this actually reminded me of that kind of ambitious undertaking by trying to actually put somebody in a place and time that they weren't in. I like that.
Yeah. It's an interesting idea. I wonder who came up with it. I mean, the story was by three people: Ira, Robert Hewitt Wolf, and Hans Beimler. So I wonder who came up with the idea for, you know, like where that little nugget came from before they all kind of started piecing it together, or if it was just an idea that they'd always kind of been passing around back and forth for a while, because that happens a lot of times too, where they say, you know, we were talking about that idea for a couple of years and we never really knew how to put it together. So that would be an interesting thing to ask them next time we see them or talk with them. But
I agree.
You know, because the story, I mean, it wasn't just the effects that they pulled off, but the story was also fun. The scenes that they chose to use, you know, the funny line with Dax saying, "Oh, I never realized how good looking he was." You know, those eyes. He says, "Oh, James Kirk was quite the ladies' man," and she said, "No, not not him, Spock. And of course, now she happens to be married to Spock's son, which is just perfect.
Which is, I mean, foreshadowing like Mickey Ficky. It's kind of amazing that yes, I actually made note of that too. I thought that was pretty special that ended up being the case, and that was written into the show like that. So many coincidences like that in the writing. But I want to say that yes, I believe so. Number one, after I watched this episode, I went back and watched the original Tribble episode with the Star Trek original cast. Right?
Shout out to David Gerrold.
Yeah, and I wanted to watch it. I wanted to watch it because I wanted to know what scenes were being taken and borrowed from, because without that reference, then it kind of doesn't give you enough to know what they're stealing from or what storyline is being incorporated. But they essentially took that show and made it another show wrapped around that show that explained different things that were already in the episode, but explained them out further, right? Very clever of them to write this, Darwin character, Darwin.
Yeah. Arn Darwin, I believe.
Arn Darwin, yeah. Very clever of them to take that storyline and have it tied in with the Bajoran orb transportation, and also to have Sisko and Dax basically on the other side of the scene that was originally filmed in the 60s, with Kirk getting a bunch of tribbles dropped on him, and now they're showing it from the perspective of inside that bulkhead. So all of these things were very well done in my opinion. Just the way they tied those things together in the story and the writing. So right off top, they just and I will say that I believe that the version that Ira and company wrote is better than the original version as far as pace, as far as storyline. It's more interesting.
Yeah.
I thought the original's a little bit slow, and that's one thing about the original show. It's a little bit slow and wordy, and not having the pace sometimes that keeps you going. The way that Deep Space Nine continues to keep scene by scene actively going. So I want to credit Ira Bear and Robert Wolf and Hans Beimler and those guys. One more.
You heard it here first, guys. Like Cirroc wants to review original series episodes.
No, I don't know about that. Oh my God, it was
showing off words like pacing and all that. He's like, let me put my critic's hat on for the original series and really dive deep into this.
But I mean, I really love this episode. They had some really gems of lines. You mentioned one in the beginning, but I thought one of them was when Bashir says to O'Brien, "I'm a doctor, not a historian."
Yeah,
and it's such a throwback line, right? Isn't that's a throwback
to Bones? Yeah, Dr. McCoy.
To Bones, right? Yeah. So I thought, wow, that's great for them to just to subtly put that little bit of a line in there and give him a McCoy line. And then the other line that I liked was when Dax says, she puts on that little dress, and she said, and the women dress differently too.
Yeah.
And Bashir goes right back into his mode.
My word.
And he's like, I think I'm gonna. What does he say? I think I'm gonna like the old days or something.
Yeah, something very Bashiri.
Yeah.
So like
I mean, something like that. Yes. So those lines were great. There was a little bit of Odo always surprises me, Renee, in his performances, because he gives you just a little bit more each time. And this time I felt when he was nurturing the Tribble and kind of, talking about it, he showed like a sensitivity and a softness that you never see from Odo. And he just decided in that moment, that he was gonna like show this kind of, animal loving, soft, nurturing side, and it just came out of nowhere, because he's normally not like that. Is that a result of him not being, being a human now and
Oh,
not being
right.
a shapeshifter? I don't know, but if it is, that's a great little adjustment on his part, performance-wise, for him to say, okay, well, now I'm more of a human, so I'm going to display slightly more human characteristics because he's eating and drinking, right? He's ordering Roctigino and Tarkalian tea, and he's being more human in his behavior of eating and drinking, and maybe even in how he, approaches animals and pets. So I thought that was another kind of subtle brilliance um, layered in the performance.
Yeah, that's a good point because he does seem more than just curious and interested in the tribbles. He seems enamored by it. Like he's like, oh, it's very soothing. It's very nice. And there was like a compassionate vibe to him, more so than just like inquisitive or, investigative. He also brings forth a little bit of humor in that same scene when he's talking with Worf, and he says, when he first says, it's soothing, isn't it? The bartender called it a tribble, and he says, oh no, he says they called it and then Worf goes, a tribble. He says this one doesn't seem to like you. He says the feeling is mutual. Like Worf is so fussy about this little hairball. And they were once mortal enemies of the Empire. An armada obliterated their homeworld. He was so proud. And Odo's like, oh, do they still sing songs of the great Tribble hunt? And then he goes, like he does like this little, when he tells a joke, his tell is that he goes like, oh, Quark. And like he does a little head bobble.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see him kind of, let loose a little bit. Most people would say let his hair down, but it was more like he let his hair poof out a little bit for this. But yeah.
I wrote that same line down when he said mortal enemy of the Empire. I was laughing my ass off because of like this little furry little, baby kitten is a mortal enemy of like this warrior race of people. And then he said Tribble homeworld. And I couldn't even fathom a Tribble homeworld when they obliterated the I was like, what would a Tribble homeworld look like? Are there buildings? Is there highways? Or is it just a bunch of piles of tribbles?
It's just pile. I mean, can you imagine if it fills up a starship that quickly? The planet is just, you can't even see the ground.
Yeah.
Like
so what do they have? Ships? How did they get out of their home? So I was thinking about all of these things and them blowing up a Tribble homeworld, or attacking it. I just thought the idea was hilarious. The fact that they addressed the difference of the looks between the old Klingons and the new Klingons.
Yes,
how
that was the first.
Was that?
That was, you're right. That was at the time. That was just as monumental as the technological feat that they accomplished, was that they actually addressed something that had never been addressed before that. And so for the longest time, from then until Enterprise, because in Enterprise, they dive a little bit more deeply into it. In fact, quite a bit deeper. But in that window of time, whatever it was, like 96 to 2005 or whatever it was, we all just thought, wow, something happened with the Klingons to make them change their looks. And we do not discuss it with outsiders, right? And he was kind of like embarrassed, they're like, Mr. Worf, what, and so that was really cool because you don't always have to explain something. Nerds do like to get it explained, sure, but at least acknowledge it. And this way they're saying, yes, we acknowledge that something happened in universe. Obviously, we know it's just they got a bigger budget and better makeup 30 years later. But in universe, they say, yeah, something happened, and we do not discuss it with outsiders. However, I would think that Julian Bashir might have some kind of knowledge of it, being a doctor and studying medicine or something, but at least it was acknowledged.
I think it was extremely clever of the writers to acknowledge that difference. It's. I'm sure it was a glaring difference that was always being brought up to them at some point if they were doing conventions or people were asking them questions directly. That must be one of the kind of running jokes of Star Trek up until that point, which is, why did the Klingons look so different? And they acknowledged it without fully getting and explaining it. But acknowledging it itself is explaining it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I like the way they take on something that would be considered a weakness and make it a strength and adapt it and admit to it and own it. Great writing, once again, great idea, very clever, in my opinion.
Yeah, like that funny line. I just want to say, like that funny line where the lady's like, the Klingons over there, and they're like, those are Klingons, and she's like, basically saying, yeah, obviously those humans with goatees are Klingons. Duh, you boys have had enough. By the way, I thought she was a great actress. Like her reactions were very big and comedic, but it also her acting was very retro 60s style. It felt to me like
60s.
Like when I was watching her deliver her lines, I had to remind myself that she was not from the original series, because not just the makeup and hair and outfit that was totally 60s, but the way she acted felt like I was watching an actress from the 60s. So I just want to point that out. I was pretty impressed with that.
I have to give her credit. She was awesome in her scenes, very natural. And like you said, she had the comedic timing down. But the other thing was when I first heard that line, I'm thinking, Odo, you're the chief of security. You're the most observant guy in the world, and you didn't realize that you're sitting for the last 3 hours surrounded by Klingons, right? I mean, weren't you curious? Like, who are these people? Or like, what are they? Like, they're not dressed like Starfleet, so they're something. I would think, at least speculate that who they are, what they're doing there, because you literally are surrounded by them. So you would think, hey, who are all these guys that are dressed up the same, ordering Rock the Gino?
Right. He's usually more observant than that.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of a little funny to me that and even Worf, who knows that the old Klingons look different, would have said, hey, look, there goes some old Klingons over there, right?
Yeah. Don't look now, but there's some Klingons over there.
Something like that. Or make a reference like, I've never seen a old Klingon in person, like
outside of history books.
Yeah, something to that effect. So the fact that they weren't aware of that was slightly like, I don't know if I'll buy that. Somebody had to notice that 20 guys walked into, 20 bikers walk into a bar. You're going to be like, all right, who are those guys?
Hey,
so that's one thing.
Real quick, we do have to jump off to our break very quickly. It's going to be the quickest break ever, but everybody at home, as you can tell, there's a lot to discuss with this episode, as you probably already guessed as well, and we will discuss it all on the other side, so stick around on the 7th Rule.